Honourable Member Grant Robertson.
Well, that member says that we can trust him. Well, I wonder if the teachers of New Zealand trust the man who brought them Nova Pay. Because that's who Craig Foss is. He's the man, Mr. Speaker, who oversaw teachers not being paid. There's one thing you should be able to expect when you get into a job is that you'll get paid. And even today, the legacy of Craig Foss carries on. There's still problems with Nova Pay today. It's Craig Foss and Heke Parata and Bill English who signed off on that. And he asks us to trust him. Craig Foss asks us to trust him, and he cannot be trusted. Mr. Speaker, this is the debate where we finalise how we feel about the National Party's budget. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, that this budget is a huge lost opportunity. This could have been the budget where once and for all New Zealand addressed inequality, where once and for all every New Zealander was guaranteed a fair go. This could have been the budget where every child got the best start in life, with support for parenting programs, with income support, with making sure that antenatal classes were properly funded. This could have been that budget, but it's not. This could have been the budget that restored the Kiwi dream of owning a home, of actually having a warm, dry home for every New Zealander to grow up in, whether they're in their own house or in a rental house. But that was a lost opportunity as well. This could have been the budget where we put people back at the centre of the economy, where we guaranteed that every New Zealander who wants to work can have a job, where we set a target and said full employment is what we should have in New Zealand because work brings dignity, work brings prosperity to this country. It could have been the budget where the government stepped up and said we will be a partner in this economy, not some bewildered bystander watching the ebb and flow of commodity prices. But no, this budget was a lost opportunity, Mr. Speaker. All of those things that I have mentioned that could have been done are a core part of the Labour Party's economic plan. And our economic plan, Mr. Speaker, is not just about celebrating a statistic here and there, slapping ourselves on the back when dairy prices go up and then grimly tightening our belts when they go down because there's no other alternative for us. That's not the economy that I believe in and all the Labour Party believes in. We believe in an economy with a human purpose. It's actually about what people gain and benefit from it. It's not an end in itself. And that is where the National Party runs out of ideas. They believe the economy is simply an end in itself. The statistics are all they're interested in. Well, the real people out there in New Zealand are worried about their jobs, whether or not there's a future for them and their children, and their wages. That's the economy for most people. Do they have a job, and are they being paid sufficiently to meet their bills and look after their families? And time and again, Mr. Speaker, this national government fails to recognise that. What we need is active job creation policy. And that comes from the very big picture, as David Parker said, of making monetary policy actually work for New Zealanders. Saying that we will use a variable savings rate to influence monetary policy, to stabilise the dollar, to give exporters a fair go. And it's worth noting that a target of exports of 40% of GDP is a laudable one. But it's going in the wrong direction, Mr Ardern. It's going the wrong way. Started at 33, hit 29, projected to go to 26. It'll be down to Bill English's poll rating before long, the percentage of exports as a part of GDP. That needs an active government. It needs industry policy that says we will support the industries where there are jobs to grow. We're not going to rely in the Labour Party on a big pile of raw logs on the port here at Wellington as our future. We're going to support an industry to process those logs, to add value to those logs and to create jobs in New Zealand because, Mr. Speaker, that's what a government does when it's a partner in the economy, not a bystander like Nick Smith would like to be. It's where we support regional development with funding to be a catalyst for making sure that there are jobs. And that's a $200 million fund that we've announced for right across the regions. And Lawrence Yule, hardly a great friend of the Labour Party, Lawrence Yule, he said that's a step in the right direction. What did the National Party come up with their great regional development idea? You get to text Paula Bennett. That's regional development for the National Party. Text Paula Bennett with your ideas about crazy and loopy rules. Ones like where you have to specify every single tree in your plans, because that's the rule brought in by the National Party. Real regional development, Mr. Speaker, happens in partnership between a government, local industry and workers, and that is what the Labour Party will bring as part of our economic plan. Mr. Speaker, the focus must be on jobs. Nearly 150,000 people are still out of work in New Zealand, and the National Party complacently believes that that is somehow okay, that somehow represents a measure of success. It cannot be a success when we have that many people out of work. There are more jobless today in every region bar Canterbury than when National took office. That is a measure of failure, not a measure of success. And when we look at young New Zealanders striving to find their way into a job to get some training, and we see more than 70,000 young New Zealanders not in employment, education or training. The commitment of the next Labour government is that every young New Zealander under the age of 20 will be in work, education or training. And that is the future we owe the next generation of New Zealanders. We owe them lifelong learning, because the jobs of tomorrow have not even been thought of today in many cases. And we need to provide opportunities for people to constantly train and retrain, and that is what the next Labour government will do. Mr. Speaker, when we look at this budget, it is the smoke and mirrors of the National Party. It's the budget, as we said on the day. You shift a bit of money around for ACC, people have to pay more in their levies than they need to. $375 million loan for a road never heard of before to disguise spending. $560 million less spending on infrastructure in Canterbury. Also, Bill English can come forward with his wafer-thin surplus. That's not a real economic plan, Mr. Speaker. A real economic plan has to be based on more than milk prices and recovery from a disaster, and that's all National has brought to the House with this budget. It needs to be based on a diversified economy, on a range of industries, high-value manufacturing, ICT, agribusiness, working with iwi in the post-settlement environment to develop new industries in forestry and wood right across New Zealand. That's real economic development. That's economic development with a human purpose that is about jobs. And instead, Sheriff Stephen Joyce sits in his office in the Beehive and fires off his latest silver bullet for the economy. So it's oil and gas, everyone must be in on it. Well, maybe there are some opportunities for that in some regions of New Zealand, but actually it's not a long-term proposition. It's not a long-term proposition from an environmental point of view, and it's definitely not a long-term proposition in a number of areas in New Zealand where those resources simply are not there. And then we have the National Party's other big solution: throw $200 million at roads. Well, what's emerging as the papers for that are coming out is there's some pretty poor benefit-cost ratios. Mr. Jonathan Young might want to have a look at the papers on the Kawara Falls Bridge, a $25 million bridge that the Speaker will be familiar with an appalling 1.1 BCR that Bill English has had built essentially so he can drive from Queenstown to Dipton when he pops in on his holidays down to Dipton. Smoke and mirrors, wasting money on things that won't actually drive economic growth in the regions. Mr. Speaker, this budget truly is a lost opportunity. The focus should have been on getting New Zealanders into work, on giving New Zealanders the opportunity to own their own home and live in warm, dry, safe houses, and to support families through more spending on health and education and more support for children. We must make our priority in the future for New Zealand reducing the gap between the haves and the have-nots. All that does, as that gap grows, is it drives a wedge between New Zealanders and it limits our potential as a country. It is not just haves and have-nots when it comes to individual income. It is haves and have-nots when it comes to regions in New Zealand. We need to see widespread economic growth right across the regions. The east coast of New Zealand and Northland deserve as much attention as Auckland does. We need to make sure that there are opportunities in the regions for good, sustainable jobs. That should be the priority of the government. That should have been the priority of this budget, and it is a huge lost opportunity that it is not.
Mr. Speaker. Honourable Todd McClay.
Mr. Speaker, that was a speech from the next leader of the Labour Party, and can I say it's one of the best speeches I've heard from a member of